Hello, everyone. My name is Tal August. Today I'll be presenting our Tokai paper called PaperPlain, Making Medical Research Papers Approachable to Healthcare Consumers with Natural Language Processing. So before jumping in, I just wanted to give a quick kind of motivating scenario for why making medical research papers approachable to a general audience might be important. So imagine that you're a 21-year-old who was recently diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease. It's summer right now, and you're deciding if you'll go back to school in the fall or if you'll take a leave of absence in order to manage your care. And you start by reading patient pamphlets and medical web pages that you trust, like the Medline Plus page on rheumatoid arthritis, to help you make this decision. And while helpful, these resources only include general information about care options, but nothing specific to someone who is your age, especially since rheumatoid arthritis is more common in older adults. So you eventually find your way to PubMed articles from this Medline Plus page. And on one of the PubMed articles, you read the sentence, "This study was a prospective, double-blind, single-simulation, randomized control trial investigating the efficacy and safety of BQC in combination with methotrexate in the treatment of RA." You immediately feel overwhelmed. The sentence might contain information relevant to you. It is talking about possible treatments, but the complex terminology and sentence makes it very hard to get any useful information from it. Now, there are systems out there like ChatGPT or Gemini that could be used to give a simplified, plain language summary of that entire medical paper, or even just that sentence. But how do we know that models actually align with human needs in this particular context? For example, what if, as a reader, you want information about a specific part of the paper, such as the methodology, that's ignored in the summary? Or you want to read the text itself because part of the generated summary was vague, or even worse, hallucinated or incorrect? The same issues come up with other single solutions. What if we simplify the entire paper? Well, a reader still needs to navigate through a paper with complex structure that's filled with information that might or might not be relevant to them. So in the project that I'll talk about here, we built a tool called PaperPlain to address the specific challenges that general audience readers faced when making sense of information in medical literature relevant to them. And to do this, we started by categorizing reader motivations and barriers through formative interviews and a user study. We then designed PaperPlain inspired by the barriers that we identified and explored different off-the-shelf modeling approaches to power these features. And finally, we ran a usability study to evaluate how well the tool supports readers in drawing useful information from medical papers. Now, in order to build a system to adapt medical language for a general audience, we needed to first know what barriers general audience readers faced when reading medical papers. So to answer this question, we conducted a Think Aloud study with 12 participants who had no medical or research background, and we had them read research papers. Participants were recruited off of Upwork, and they were given scenarios where they might turn to medical research papers. And these scenarios were similar to the scenario I gave in the beginning, except a lot more detailed. And these were designed based on conversations with patients, caregivers, and medical providers, all of whom had experience reading medical research papers and communicating medical research papers to a general audience. At the end of the study, we also interviewed participants about the barriers that they surfaced during the study, and to categorize these barriers, we conducted a reflexive thematic analysis on the study and interview transcripts. From this process, we uncovered two major groups of barriers. The first were knowledge-based barriers, which are those related to knowing particular things. So examples of these barriers were not knowing a particular term or how a statistical test worked. So an example of kind of a common refrain we heard that was representative of knowledge barriers was, "What does this word mean?" The second set of barriers were disciplinary barriers, which are based on understanding how information in a field, in this case medicine, are communicated. So examples include knowing how to find relevant information in the paper, as well as being able to assess a paper's rigor. And examples of disciplinary barriers are kind of a question that came up a lot that's representative of a disciplinary barrier is, where is the information that I want in this paper? So a lot of current techniques for simplifying text, especially in the natural language processing space with things like large language models, have been focused around these knowledge barriers and not so much around the disciplinary barriers, right? Language models like ChatGPT can help people understand a specific piece of text by simplifying it, but they don't necessarily guide readers in knowing where to look and what to read. And while these systems are an important step to addressing the challenges that we identified in this project, they really only address part of what readers need. So to address both knowledge and disciplinary barriers, we developed PaperPlain. For knowledge barriers, PaperPlain includes definitions and section summarization. And for disciplinary barrier, PaperPlain provides extracted and simplified answers to a curated set of frequently asked questions or FAQs. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the tool. I'm just going to do a quick kind of mock walkthrough of the tool. And after going through these features, I'll cover the models and methods we use to power PaperPlain. So imagine that you're diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, which affects your immune system. You start by reading patient pamphlets, and while helpful, they only include general information about care options, and you're interested in finding possible new treatments to talk to your doctor about. So you find this paper that looks promising since it's a review of possible new treatments called therapeutic peptides, and the title is Therapeutic Peptides for the Treatment of Systemic Lupus Erythematosus, A Place in Therapy. Now, the abstract and introduction of this paper just look like a wall of text to you, with words like clinical presentation and pathogenesis. But you notice that on the left, there are these key questions that the paper answers. And you look at the first one, which is about the condition that the paper studies. And you read a short, simplified answer snippet about lupus. You then see that there's a link to a paragraph from that question, and you click it. And this brings you to the first paragraph of the introduction with a simplified version of the text below it. So using the simplified version first and knowing what this paragraph is now about, you can much more easily read through this section. Since your main goal with this paper is to know what new treatments you could talk to your doctor about, you scroll down to the conclusion. But again, you're confronted with words like armamentarium and immunomodulatory. And you notice that these words are actually highlighted in the paragraph or kind of underlined in the paragraph. And so you click on the first one, learning that armamentarium is just a fancy word for tools used to treat a condition, and immunomodulatory means to be able to regulate the immune system. Now, this gets you through the short conclusion, but then you get to the expert opinion below it, which just seems super long. It goes on for this page and a whole other page. But you notice that on the top, there's a little tag indicator that you can click. And you click on, and this gives you a short, simplified summary of that section. You learn that therapeutic peptides could in the future be helpful at supporting the treatment of lupus, but none have been licensed yet. Okay, so now that you have kind of an overview of how you might use PaperPlain, I'll walk through the different models and methods we used. Just as a note, we developed PaperPlain before ChatGPT was released and kind of the advent of these larger language models. And so we use a lot of different natural language processing approaches and kind of specialized models for these different features and powering these different features. We have developed a newer version of PaperPlain as well that kind of uses more end-to-end pipelines with large language models kind of as the core component. So I'll go through how we originally developed each of these methods or each of these features, and then also kind of how we've updated it with current technology as well. So to start, PaperPlain provides term definitions, which are aimed at alleviating knowledge barriers in paper reading. And to provide these definitions, we start by identifying biomedical entities with sci-spacey named entity recognition, which is a model that identifies named entities, which are often proper nouns or different terms in a paper. And we link these entities to definitions in the UMLS, which is the Unified Medical Language System, as well as in Wiktionary. And because this extraction and linking leads to a bunch of false positives with words like expert or negative being defined, we then filter based on word frequency and length, which leaves us with terms defined in the paper. Now, as an update to this, rather than having to link to existing definitions, a lot of these definitions can actually be generated automatically using large language models now. For example, GPT 3.5 Turbo can generate definitions which very rarely are hallucinated, especially if you give information from the paper along with the term being defined. For section summaries, we started by concatenating the first sentence of each paragraph in a section. We then fed those concatenated sentences into GPT-3 for simplification. And because, again, these were kind of earlier versions of GPT-3, we messed around with a lot of different hyperparameter settings and prompts for summarizing text for different grade levels. And we eventually settled on the best prompt being summarizing text for a 5th grade student, since this output was the most coherent while still providing details about the section. And this led to plain language section summaries in the paper. Now, again, as an update to this, because models have gotten much better at taking much longer pieces of text to summarize, now you can just feed in a full section into GPT 3.5 Turbo to get a section summary without having to do this initial extraction step. Now, to address disciplinary barriers, PaperPlain includes FAQs or key questions. And to get these, we started by manually curating questions from guidelines for expert-written plain language summaries, such as the Cochrane reviews. And to extract answers in the paper, we modified a biomedical QA model, which is a QA model is a question answering model. And because the original model was trained on extracting answers from a paper that are at the word or phrase level, we instead used some heuristics to collect section answers, so answers at the section level, to link to the key questions. We then simplified these passages using GPT-3 the same way as we did for the section summaries, and that gave us a list of key questions and their answers in the paper. Now, again, as an update, this answer extraction step can now be done by language models, and using newer language models for the simplification step kind of leads to more coherent plain language answers. So we then evaluated PaperPlain in a 24 partial within participants usability study, and participants were again recruited off of Upwork, and they had no medical or research experience. And I'll cover two of the research questions we had for the study here. The first was, how does PaperPlain affect participants' self-reported reading difficulty? And the second was, how do participants use PaperPlain's features? So for the first research question, kind of the top level exciting finding was that PaperPlain made it significantly easier for people to read papers and find relevant information compared to using a typical PDF reader. So when controlling for individual paper and participant variability, the increase in reading ease was close to 2 points on a 5-point scale, constituting over a 38% increase. And this was all without any loss in paper comprehension. So we also included comprehension questions to make sure that participants weren't skimming or kind of ignoring information because PaperPlain was supporting them. And actually, we found that participants with PaperPlain answered generally more questions correct compared to those with a PDF reader, although this wasn't a significant difference. For our second research question, participants used all the features available to them throughout reading a paper. And interestingly, the key question seemed to be the most preferred feature. So here's a plot showing the usage of features over the course of a reading session. And on the y-axis is the number of readers using each feature. And on the x-axis is the minute in which this feature usage happened. So the reading time was 10 minutes for all participants. And the two takeaways from this plot are that the features are used fairly consistently throughout the reading session. And the second is that the key questions were used the most out of all the features. This was on the far left here. So we suspect this preference for the key questions is because they afforded participants an alternative indexing into the paper. So they allowed them to more effectively find relevant information in a paper without being overwhelmed by the complex language. So here you can see a plot of a participant's paper position on the y-axis over time on the x-axis. Kind of the main takeaway from this graph is that participants with access to the key questions, this blue line on the left, jumped in the paper much more, shown by kind of these jagged lines up and down, compared to participants who went through the paper linearly without the key questions, so this red line on the right. And this is important because participants who read a paper linearly did not have time to focus on relevant information in the paper, such as the introduction and discussion, which are those gray bars in the plot. And sometimes participants who read a paper linearly actually couldn't even get through an entire paper. One additional interesting finding from the usability study was that none of the text was perfect for all the readers. So some readers appreciated how high level the summaries were and found the language in the original paper overwhelming, like participant 17. And others found the summaries far too simplified, like participant 3. So this suggests that good communication is person-specific. And this is a plug for another paper that I'll be presenting at CHI, which is on adapting plain language summaries, kind of adjusting the complexity of plain language summaries for different general audience readers, which was inspired by the work we did at PaperPlain. So that's everything. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions now. And if you're interested in playing around with PaperPlain, here's a new version of the tool with a lot of preloaded PubMed papers on it as well. So thank you very much.